How many Scotch malt whiskey distilleries do you imagine there are available for sale at any one point in time? If you followed Billy Walker's track record, you would imagine that they're as common as kneecaps. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Thursday night vPub. Really excited to see you all here to join me for another session of whiskey during these really continuing difficult times. One of the silver linings, I've stopped feeling guilty about talking about silver linings because there are some and they're becoming more and more apparent. And as time is kind of becoming more challenging and difficult for us, I think we need to take comfort in these silver linings. But one of them is certainly the fact that most whiskey folk seem to be at a reduced rate of schedule. That is, that they're available. And I'm very glad that my guest tonight is available to join me. Of course, so many of you have been asking me for so long to reach out to Billy Walker. And I did that recently, and he said, that he'd come along and join us for a vPub. And I'm looking forward to inviting Billy in just a few minutes. So great to see you all. It's wonderful to welcome you here on another Thursday night. And I'll just jump into the chat and say hello to the wonderful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Fantastic. So great to see you all. What are we doing? Pete Head, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. And hi, Roy, welcome in your own vPub. Thank you very much, Pete Head. It's nice to have you in, my friend. You'll notice over my right shoulder, I've got your wooden Glencairn glass still sitting up there. And I look at it from time to time and marvel at it. There's an upcoming video I'm putting together that might make a wee cameo appearance, my friend. Wonderful to welcome you in again. Scott Kilted Moose is saying, hi, Aquavite. Scott, always great to have you in, my friend. Great to see you. Whiskey Throttle Daniel from Canada. Superb, Daniel. Great to see you. Marcus Kreitner, Everwind, Whiskey Radar, Gregor McQuee, Anthony Dunn, James Burgoyne, and Jimmy Jazz. Jimmy U-Star, great to see you. Daniel Vermas is here as well from Hungary. I break kneecaps. I'm sure you do, Daniel. Great to see you, my friend. Nice to welcome you in again. Kevin Grant is here. Cousin Kevin. Too Slow. Che Francis, Rico Donaire, Hey Jude, hello everyone. Hey Jude, that looks like a new name. It's very nice to welcome you in here. Luna Aaron is here, as well as Gixer Skipper Luke, Bill Monteith, Anthony Dunn, One Lost Cause, good to see you, my friend. Laddie Whiskey Nerd Rombout from the Netherlands, great to see you. Belgium has brought us Menno's Multi-Mission, Jason Fisk, Whiskey Weekend Dram, Shane Lie. Now he sent me the phonetic way to pronounce his surname, and I think he said Lie works. I hope that's just about right, Shane. Regardless, as long as I'm not offending you, it's nice to welcome you in, my friend. Orange Rule is here, good to have you. Bud Jenkins, Helen, hopefully Alan is alongside you tonight as well. Sorry, Andy. Good to have you, Helen. Anthony is here. Radek, Chris B, so many of you. Wonderful to welcome you all in. Like I say, my guest tonight, I have been wanting to reach out to for a long time, because it seems to me that the guest that I have in tonight has got a very defined way about how he wants to make whiskey. But I'm more interested in how he wants to take it to market. He's got a fair old track record behind him. He started out as early as 1971 in the industry. He goes back quite a long way. And through working at Ballantyne's here in Walker, and then moving on to Inverhouse, and then a lengthy career at Burns Stewart, reviving some of the Burns Stewart distilleries while he was there. He then moved on to bringing brands back to life, actually, like Benriach, Glendronach, and Glenglassaugh. Finally, in 2016, he sold the Benriach Distillery Co. over to Brown Forman, and we thought that would be Billy Walker going off and hanging up his whiskey boots for a wee while. But no, the story wasn't finished. No sooner had we read the PR releases that he'd sold up and moved on, that there was other news stories coming out, how he'd planned a new brand, a new distillery, or let's say reviving another distillery, another under-the-radar brand. It's fascinating to me. And I don't want to, what we'll try and do tonight is we'll bring the guest forward in the stream to maximise his time while he's here, and then kind of let him off hire a wee bit earlier than we normally would. I'm going to reach out to Billy Walker and welcome him in now and just say, Billy, I am so grateful and to welcome you in to a vPub. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be here, Roy.
Wonderful. Are you sitting comfortable? I'm sorry?
Looking forward to the experience.
Yes. This is a first for you, yes?
Yes.
Now, I notice you've popped up in a lot of social media and things. You've been doing some of your own events recently as well. But this one is very kind of, let's say, seat of the pants. We don't really know what a lot of the chat are going to be asking us tonight, but that's what it's all about. It's very much as if you were just hosting one of your own events, or a tasting, a Glenallachie tasting, or whatever it may be. I've got some prepared questions that I took from patrons and things beforehand, Billy, but we'll just kind of wing it and see how the conversation goes and flows. You and I have not set any agenda tonight. It's very much about just talking about your story, your experiences, and your plans for Glenallachie as well. Can I start with a wee bit of tongue-in-cheek?
Sure.
I can imagine 2016, you've sold the Benriach Distillery Co. And then you've just kind of walked down to your local newsagent and you've picked up a copy of Scotch Malt Distilleries Trader or something, and you've flicked through the multiple distilleries and the multiple pages before you finally picked out your choice of buying Glenallachie. Is that how these things happen, Billy?
No.
Not quite.
The sentiment might be partly like that. Suddenly that something that you had invested a lot of time and effort in is out of reach, and I have to say, and probably in very good hands now. It's what you do then. I mean, I find it very difficult to wake up in the morning without a purpose, and so I mean, virtually within seconds of selling the business. And that was a very difficult thing to do, actually, selling the business, because it wasn't something that I was necessarily comfortable with. But on reflection, it was maybe the right time to do it, because maybe we had taken a couple of these brands as far as we could within the framework of how we wanted to engage with the routes to market that A, we were comfortable with, and B, we were familiar with. So yeah, waking up in the morning with something to do was important. So virtually, almost immediately, we had completed the sale. I kind of started discussions about the possibility of what might be next, and there were one or two discussions after that. But you know what? It wasn't such a difficult thing to find the next opportunity, if I'm honest.
Is that true? Because I think that's the point I wanted to make, is that, I guess everything is always just a question of price, but there can't be many malt distilleries available to buy. It must be tricky for somebody coming in.
I think it's more than that, Roy. There is a responsibility on the buyer, of course. There's also a responsibility in the seller, and a lot of the people who are in the seller category are always looking to, if they're going to sell the asset, they want to be comfortable that it's going into safe hands, and that they're not going to find themselves in a position where they might, at some point in the near or the distant future, be embarrassed by having done the wrong thing. Now, that sounds like a conceit. I don't mean it to sound like that, but having been in the industry, people kind of know if you're safe hands or you're not safe hands. And if you're not in the industry, I think it's doubly difficult, because you really have to demonstrate that you either are safe hands or you will honour the obligation to be safe hands.
That's very interesting. That is very interesting. So by the way, I've not actually raised a glass to welcome you in. What's in your glass, Billy?
Well, I'm not embarrassed to say, but I was tempted to have a look at a very, very old bottle of Johnnie Walker Black.
Well, it just so happened that Billy had mentioned he was going to pour a glass of Johnnie Walker Black, and I decided to join him, and I reached for a Johnnie Walker Black. And wouldn't you know, we both reached for a vintage Johnnie Walker Black. rather than a fairly modern one. I think yours is somewhere around the 90s.
Yes.
Mine's just a wee bit earlier than that, around about the 1980s. So let me raise this wee glass, Billy, and say welcome. Thanks so much. Sláinte.
Thanks for inviting me, Roy. Yes, Slanch.
So you actually, obviously you had a track record, and you bought from Chivas, you bought from Pernod Ricard, Glenallachie. And I have to say, my perception of Glenallachie, maybe just before you guys got involved, there was a release, there was a kind of a price point release that went out to supermarkets and things, an on-age statement release. I don't know if you were involved in that one, but before that, Glenallachie was something that was the preserve of an independent bottler. It really didn't have much of an identity. Was that something that attracted you?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely our template, that it's important that the brand either has not been exposed or it's been underexposed to the market. Really, really important. And I'll come back to what you said about the release. It's really important that it hasn't been compromised by a big presence in multiple retailers, because that is not who we engage with. I mean, our routes to market, the people that we trust and we entrust, are private independent retailers, private independent distributors, importers. And that's the people, and these are the routes to market that we're comfortable with. But going back to just before we bought it, Chivas did make a release. But my suspicion, Roy, is it was to protect the intellectual property, that you actually have to have a brand in position to ensure that the IP doesn't default on you. But thankfully, it wasn't too much of a problem for us. But yeah, we like a blank canvas. We like a brand that we can actually paint the pictures with. Inheriting somebody else's position in the marketplace is probably a much more difficult proposition than buying something that's been operating under the radar, but importantly, has got a decent, better than decent reputation within the blending circles, and had a terrific range of inventory that we were managing to acquire.
That's interesting, and I know that I think what a lot of the discussions that I have when we talk about Glenallachie and things. Firstly, I mean, it's the speed that you've moved at. This is quite incredible when we talk about 2017, because it's probably been at least 2 years now that you've already had a solid core range out there. A lot of single cask releases, international single cask releases. The speed that you've moved at is remarkable. Is that down to the stocks that you inherited there, or is it just that you wanted to move quickly and get a brand out there with a core range as quickly as you could?
I think clearly we wanted to engage the market. We wanted to show the market who we were. We wanted to introduce who Glenallachie really is, and can be indeed, to the market sector that we wanted to engage with. But we spent a lot of time, and very quickly spent a lot of time, Roy, looking at the inventory, checking the cask, just being familiar and intimate, understanding the DNA, the personality of what we had, and indeed then understanding what were the building blocks that we wanted to take it on to the next stage. What did we have? What did we have here that we could work with, and what was our expectation? What would be good? What would be good with the kind of base that we inherited?
Would I be being rude if I suggested that Glenallachie was there really just as a fully for a blend product? You know, it was being made for a very specific purpose, as a pillar to support a lot of blends within the Chivas portfolio, and not a lot of the stuff that you inherited would ever have been laid down to be released as a single malt.
I think that's absolutely true, but I think you also have to see everything in context, because just going back to 2003, 2004, when we bought Benriach, if you reflect on where single malt was then, almost every distillery that was out there, with the exception of maybe the big four or the big six, was in position to support the blending market. Yeah. And indeed, when we bought Benriach, it's almost true to say there were something like 20, 24 single malt distilleries that were in mothball. And we are today has been an amazing period for the development of single malt, the single malt sector of the market, and it continues to grow. And you know, there's an education going on, and there's an appetite from the kind of consumers who are probably sitting in your pub tonight who want to learn more, know more. But you know, we have to. You do have to remember that pre-2004, single malt was virtually owned by the big boys, and so it's been quite a sea change when you see the small boutique distilleries doing interesting things and being allowed to do interesting things that perhaps is more restricted if you're within a bigger company who have got other things to attend to as well, like very, very big blended whiskey brands.
Yes, and even the malt brands are legacy brands as well. They're trying to provide a very consistent product time and time again. Whereas you're coming into this, you've got the luxury of being able to create virtually from scratch.
And it is a luxury. It is a luxury, Roy. And you know, we are not absorbed by necessarily continuity. We want each expression and each batch to express itself. Of course, there's going to be a personality of each of the categories, but we don't drive for continuity. If we achieve continuity, fine. But we like that there might be differences in each of the batches. It's an attractive proposition.
Embrace the variation. I always talk about this organic spirit that's matured inside an organic vessel. And it's very, very difficult to ensure that consistency. It's interesting. One of the questions that's been sent in tonight, actually, from the YouTube comments was from Constantine. And he actually says, he said, look, I bought a 2019 Glenallachie 12-year-old, and it's very different. It's much darker in colour than the 2018 release. That plays into exactly what you're talking about, perhaps.
And it's also, and we will come on to this, Roy, and I'm sure I'll be asked the question. Look, we took what we had, and we developed what we had when we did the first releases. But that was only the start of the journey. We always knew that we had a moving and developing brand here, and it would certainly change batch to batch. We're probably at a point now where we have achieved 85% of the kind of end finish we're looking for. Getting the last 10-50% might be a lot more difficult. But it is important to note that primarily we are driving this to be a brand that will be significantly influenced by sherry wood.
That's interesting. That's another one of the questions that come in from the community about your general profile. So let me ask then, I mean, what I want to do is just reach out to the chat, the community quickly and say, look, there's lots of you going to be wanting to ask questions. Highlight me, of course, at Aquavite. But what I'll do is I'll just let the conversation go for a while, and then I'll come in and I'll ask you to maybe just copy and paste your questions so that I can get a block of them at the same time. That might be a better way to work it. The chat's going back very, very quickly. There's over 300 people in, Billy, so they're all interested to hear what you're saying. But when you said developed, you used the word developed there. That's quite interesting. To my ears, and when I'm thinking about that, if you've inherited a deep stock, I imagine that developed might encompass something like significant cask investment, and then a significant program of you re-racking a lot of the stock into fresh casks or good quality casks. Is that real? Did that happen? Would that be something that you were?
Virtually from day one, we have been pursuing that particular course of action. We will spend something like £1 million in sherry casks every year, and we need to get
£1 million.
Yeah. And that's not because what we inherited is in disappointing wood. It's in good wood, and it's developing the right kind of building blocks that we can move on to the next stage of the flavour extension. A lot of what we inherited was in fresh American wood. So you're going to get butterscotch, heather honey, vanilla pods, hints of orange zest. So these are the kind of basic building blocks you would expect from Glenallachie. We want to take it on now to enrich it with things like dark chocolate, mocha, damsons, plums, all the kind of things you would expect from a richly sherried style whiskey.
I mean, sometimes also I think that, you know, an American barrel, an old hoggy or something, even something that's been used 2 or 3 times before, it can get a hard time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad cask or bad spirit. I think that for me as a whiskey enthusiast, I think that when good spirit is left in a quiet cask for long enough, it can produce magical things. But clearly what you're saying is that the focus for Glenallachie going forward would be to be true to that kind of traditional sherry matured kind of Speyside style.
Well, that'll be the house style. But going back to what you said, Roy, you're absolutely right. You know, if you put spirit in let's say a second fill or a refill hogshead and leave it for 10 or 15 years, you get a very, very interesting product.
Yes.
You get a product that has a slower extract from the wood and a slower maturation, but it retains some of its youthful characteristics that deliver some wonderful stuff when it's 12 or 15 or even older. So it's not about that these are bad casks. It's just that we wanted to get the house style determined. And by the way, we still have lots of casks in that category. And we've got some interesting thoughts about these.
Good, fantastic. Luna Aaron has asked about cornerstones, and she's talked about the blending industry serving as a template for interesting distilleries to develop into single malt brands. What are the cornerstones, she's asking, of a good profile then? I think you've touched on that then. Your house style is going to be perhaps a sherry matured product. So the cornerstones for that, one of them is clear, and that's good quality sherry casks. Now, would that be American oak, European oak, a mix of both? Or
mix of both. And you know, a typical makeup for a Glenallachie vatting will be something like 70-75% PX, 15% Oloroso, and the balance will be in American virgin oak.
wow, okay.
That's kind of the building blocks that we're working with at the moment.
Sounds like you're describing your 12-year-old there.
Yes, and maybe even the 15-year-old, and maybe even the cask strength 10-year-old. But these are the building blocks. But before that, there's another level at which you know, if you make pure spirit and you put it into good wood, you will not end up with a good product. If you make good spirit and put it into poor wood, you will not end up with a good product. If you make good spirit, however you define that, and that's up to the blender, and put it into good wood, you have got a fighting chance of delivering something that's either good and maybe even exceptional.
So one of the cornerstones that Luna's probably talking about there is that good spirit. And I know that one of the highly talked about things when you were busy at Glenallachie, even before you'd kind of showed us what your core range was going to be, was that experimentation with the extension of fermentation times. Can you talk about that? Would you see that as a cornerstone?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are other cornerstones, Roy, but fermentation is really important. And there had been a drive historically to shorten fermentation to 40, 52 hours. And frankly, the fermentation is still alive then. You know, it's pretty active, and you're taking it, and it's probably still got a bit of a journey to go, and you're taking it from there to the wash charger and then to the wash still pretty active. And it's hard to distill that. You know, controlling a very active wash actually in the still, you really got to be on your game, because it can spill over and it can carry solids over. It can create some problems in the neck and also in the condensers, and give you off notes. We are pursuing long fermentation because it gives you a full term conversion, and you also get some additional good bacterial development within the fermentation. And by the time you take it to the wash still, it's gone full term, it's benign, it's inactive, and it's very, very easy to distill.
That's interesting. That is interesting. So it's a balancing act there between the fermentation time and let's say the condition of the wash when it's first put into the wash still.
But these are practical things, Roy. But I mean, generally, I would always go for log fermentation. It's why not? You're definitely going to get some kind of flavor extension.
I think we're seeing that talked about more and more. And it's interesting because I remember there used to be a lot of discussions about the bottleneck of the fermentation room, that kind of washback bottleneck, but you're running a fraction of your capacity now. I think Glenallachie theoretically could potentially produce up to about 3.5-4 million litres.
Yeah, but if
what
you
are
were
you running at now?
We're operating about 600,000 litres, so we've got plenty of room to do the kind of things we want to do. There's no pressure on the system. There's no pressure on the stills. There's no pressure on the mash tun. It gives us great room to just relax and do things the right way.
It's going to be interesting, the road ahead. Skogsmard has sent a question for Billy. Are there any blends you came up with which looked interesting on paper but didn't work in the glass that you'd like to share the story behind? That must be a regular occurrence, surely. Or is it whiskey? You just put any amount of whiskey together and it turns out fantastic. I know that's not true in my phone.
Yeah, I think most blenders will tell you that if you're familiar with the substrates that you're working with, you should get it by and large right. But if you're making, and it depends who the market, what market you're targeting for. But I mean, a typical blend will be, if you're looking at a standard blend, you would be probably about 70-30 grain malt, of which you would have a maximum 2.5-3% peated malt, so that it doesn't overwhelm. On an older blend, you'd maybe go 65-35, 60-40, and you could be much more adventurous with the ingredients. But yeah, well, look, things have gone wrong. I remember at Ben Riach, we re-racked some quite old whiskey into a Tokai cask, and it was a total disaster. It was more like acetone than whiskey.
So what do you do at that point? Presumably you blend it out, or you?
No, that one went to the earth, I think. I think we decided that we would rack that.
So you raised a wee prayer for it and just said that goes down to the lessons learned book.
Yeah.
I'm going to pour. Well, I have already poured. I've had it here. We had a discussion when we did the tech setup for this, Billy, and I asked you, what would you recommend I go out and buy for us to have a dram together? And I've got that sitting here in the glass, and we'll get to it in a wee while. But I was curious about this because I missed out on a Koval release that you did. Koval casks you used, but this seems to be a kind of evolution of that. This is your 9-year-old rye wood finish, 48% ABV. I'll commend you for putting a single-digit age statement on there. I think we need to see more of that. It's fantastic. But here we talk about your house style being that kind of sherry matured product, and I think we're going to get something closer to that when we have a wee taste of the 15. Am I doing this in the wrong order? Should it be the rye first? Or?
No, I would definitely do the rye first. Absolutely.
Good. Because I think that this is you kind of showing us that, look, we don't have to be all traditional and take everything seriously. Here's a new take. Why would you reach to rye casks, Billy? Why have you used this?
Look, it's a good question, and we were kind of fascinated by the proposition. I suppose my answer is why not? But there were some quite creative distilleries in the United States doing some good stuff with rye whiskey. Koval would be one of them. I'm pretty sure that these are the casks that we vatted here at Rabbit Hole. And we were quite impressed with the work they were doing. So we thought, why don't we try and get some of these casks in? We knew that the base, the casks that we had already had was sitting there and ready to vat, were fresh American barrels, a mix of fresh American, some refill hogsheads, and some second fill American barrels. So we knew that we had the kind of floor flavors would be butterscotch, vanilla, honey, some orange zest, maybe a little bit of treacle. What do we want the rye to bring? We wanted more intense spices to come from the rye. Ginger, nutmeg, cinnamon, even hints of mint. And if I'm being honest, these casks are they're not difficult to follow, but it's important to follow development. And getting it right, hitting the sweet spot, you just need to be on the game. You need to be on it all the time to make sure you get what you're looking for from these casks. I think they were in for about 18 months. And look, I like experimenting. I think this is a good experiment. It's the opposite end of the flavour profile from where the kind of the core range, richly sherry style is. So we're not totally wedded to being absolutely obsessional about sherry whiskey. We are going to have interesting trips into finishes and some very interesting wines. We're going to look at some virgin woods, Appalachian, French, Spanish. Definitely going to get some Mizunari. I think I mentioned to you last time we spoke, Roy, I'd love to get some Scottish oak.
Yeah.
It's difficult to sawmill. It's difficult to cooper. But it has been used historically many decades ago.
I remember Glengoyne bringing an expression out about 15 years ago.
And they're difficult to cooper, and they have a tendency to leak. So you need to be on the case all the time. But that's something we're going to do. We're going to look at some other Russian wood, which we had a wonderful. Got some beautiful Russian cask when we were on Glenallachie. We had a relationship with a winery called Massandra, very, very nice winery in the Crimea, and they turned out fantastic. Wow. I'm not sure if they've been bottled yet, and these are fantastic thick staves, great to work with. So yeah, going back to the rye, we wanted to experiment. We wanted to infuse some of these additional spices, and I think we've captured it.
I have to say my impression as I approach it, and I've only just opened this and bought this this week. I opened it tonight. I have to say I struggled to find a shop that had both of these in the same, and I got it from the Green Welly shop, and I have to take my hat off to them. They got it here very, very quickly next day. Yeah, it's you worry about deliveries in these times and things, but I was pleased to get it. So they've been sitting there kind of shouting at me the last few days waiting for tonight. As I approach this, everything that you're saying is intact. Of course, the creaminess is there. The vanilla and the butterscotch is all there. But what shouts loudest is that bright, vibrant spice. And in fact, you mentioned mint. As soon as you said mint, yeah, that's obviously there now. I'll pick it up completely. But it's very floral. It's almost like walking into a florist. It's very floral. So I'm getting kind of really quite lovely green notes. But it's almost like with this expression, we're getting a wee bit more, maybe because it's the youth as well. There's a lot of kind of grip and texture there with the youth of it as well. 48% doesn't help. It's brilliant. Maybe we're getting a wee bit closer to something that's a bit more what you've inherited at Glenallachie.
Oh, unquestionably. This is as close as you will get. It has a touch of refinement with the presence in the rye casks. And these are good. The guys that supply these, they know what they're doing. These casks, prior to being filled with rye, were air dried for 36 months. Medium toast, medium char. So the expectation of all the kind of flavors that we're looking for from that are kind of locked into this experience. But this is quite close to, this is a pretty Glenallachie as it was. It's been twisted a little bit, but that's Glenallachie as it was. Yeah, you're right.
I used to have quite a cynical approach to kind of any kind of rye cask maturation in Scotch. I always felt like, rye is something that rye whiskies do very well. Why would Scotch go there? But it's because I didn't enjoy rye at the time, probably. That was my attitude. I was very of the opinion that rye was just a wee bit, a step outside of my comfort zone. Now I love rye whiskies. I genuinely enjoy them, and I'll reach for them and happily just sit there purring while I enjoy a nice rye whiskey. So this is a much more interesting prospect for me. I have to say that it's very fresh, very bright. I think it's very spirit driven, and I mean that in a positive way. And I think that if I left this in the glass long enough, I think that it would just become more and more inviting on the nose there. You get the floral aspect. I'm speaking to the man who made it, the blender, but
I mean,
to me, it's like a garden. It's like a
But I tried to get by. The original kind of Glenallachie features, like the kind of orchard fruits, the floral notes, the honey, the vanilla, the butterscotch, the orange zest. What really pleases me is that we've captured the additionality in terms of the spices, the cinnamon, the ginger, the nutmeg, the mint, even a hint of cloves. And I think we've caught it at the right point. I'm not necessarily saying this is a sweet point. You need to be really, really clever to capture the sweet point. But we always have to make sure we get the balance right and that we don't overcook it. And these casks, at this age, this period of about 15 to 18 months is probably about right.
Very interesting, very nice. Anthony Dunnis said he's bought me a dram, and he said had the 12 as my wedding whiskey due to Ralphie's whiskey of the year. Now again, that was a very, very recent thing. I think that was, could that just have been last year? 2019 was the 12 was his whiskey of the year. Yeah.
And I would say to
Anthony, that was Anthony.
Anthony, I would say to you, the 12-year-old has also been in a journey, and I think if you bought the latest production, you would be very, very pleased.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So just before we move on from this rye cask one, then, how long would it have spent in rye casks typically?
Oh, probably about 8 years. And then the challenge, Roy, is to get them freshly dumped. And one of the absolutes for us is that they mustn't rinse the cask with water after they've dumped them. They must be freshly dumped, immediately bunged and shipped. And so we capture them as they come in, and we will re-rack almost immediately they come off the vehicle.
As fresh as they can possibly be.
Fresh as they can possibly be, yeah.
And this is, I mean, I know that practice has changed over time, but the days of breaking it down in a cooperage in the States or whatever into shooks and recoopering it here, that's nothing like that. The casks here are preserved to be as intact and as fresh as possible.
Yes, and the consequence of shipping them as full cask is you do get a bit of movement, so you might actually get some failures. You might get some leakers, but maximum 15% that you have to maybe tighten the hoops and do a little bit of coopering on them. But if they come in fresh, it's a big bonus. You're getting clean, crisp, unadulterated.
That's interesting. There's another question from Skogsmith saying, question for Billy. Do you think there is lost potential in Scotch by requiring oak for aging as opposed to just requiring aging wood like Irish whiskey? Do you think, is there any other woods out there, Billy, that you would like to experiment with, or are you quite happy with the variations on the oak theme as you've already mentioned to us?
A difficult question. Look, we are being the age I am a bit of a traditionalist. I think there's plenty of scope to work with oak. There's plenty of different genuses. I don't know if we'll mention chinkapin tonight, but even in the United States, the regional variation in oak is quite interesting. French, Spanish, Czechoslovakian, Romanian, Russian. They all bring Scotch and Scottish, and that we will do this, Roy. We will definitely get some Scotch oak sawmilled and coopered, and it will probably be this year. But there's plenty of variation in that, and indeed plenty of flavour variation in the various oak genuses. So I wouldn't like to push hard against the Scotch Whisky Association. They're too big for me.
Daniel Whiskey Throttle is saying nothing wrong with being a traditionalist. Everyone is saying, I wonder if you could ask the esteemed guest on the rationale of a distillery release an expression at 40 to 43 to 46%. Is it profit-driven, taste-driven, competition-driven? Everyone, I think that's a concept that I've definitely wanted to broach with Billy on Whiskey tonight, is that, you know, often we've talked about that kind of legacy thing where the market was built on the back of blends. It migrated to malts. 43% export strength was typical. But let me take it one step further, Billy, and ask something I wanted to ask you tonight. You've set up your stall at your previous distilleries and very much at Glenallachie as well. Even the 12-year-old is 46%, right?
Yes.
You state that all your whiskies are natural colour. You won't chill filter them.
No.
And you'll always, everyone I've seen has either had a vintage or an age statement on there. Is that important to you?
Yes. I think age does matter. And being Scottish and being based in Scotland, I think it's quite important to make the point that we climatically we are in a good position to allow whiskey to age without it being commercially stupid. We lose about 2% per annum, so we can get it to some pretty old whiskey. But going back to the fundamentals of 46, 48%, the bottom line basically is that at 46%, you're buying yourself security in terms of keeping the whiskey bright and unlikely to create any kind of precipitation, cold flock or warm flock. Indeed, if you went to 48%, you're probably buying yourself even more security. So it is important. Look, it's all about getting the balance right between the integrity and the sustainability of the brightness and the stability of the product. If you go below 43, go below 46, very cold climate and it's around for quite a long time, you might have a problem. If you go to 40 and you don't chill filter, you will absolutely have a problem. So it is about striking the balance between.
And when you talk about a problem, you're speaking about the solids and a haze. You're talking about deposits in the bottom of the bottle, right?
I mean, they're not damaging solids. It's just some of the flavor characteristics, the long chain fatty acid ester molecules may be coming out of solution. As you drop the strength of the whiskey, the solution characteristics of the spirit change, so that some of these things start being less soluble in the liquid. And the more you chill that, the more you accelerate that possibility. At 46%, it's probably just about okay. It probably is okay. At 48 and higher, you don't have a problem.
And hence why they take that extra step of that kind of forced chill filtration.
Yes.
It costs money to do that extra step. So there has to be a reasonable reason to do it, right?
It costs money, but also you're also buying into a lower tax rate somewhere. The duty is going to be less on a 40% than it is at 46%. But I have to say that even from a flavour and a mouthfeel experience, if you get it right, 46, 48, 50%.
And you're very much preaching to the converted here. I think the vast majority of the people in the chat, while we would like to be open-minded about whatever ABV the whiskey was put in front of us, we would look for engagement and flavour and just enjoy the whiskey. If we're going to go out and pick something from a shelf and spend money on something, to see what I call the ABCs in place, the A for age statement, B for bottling strength, C for chill filtration, and D for dye, if I see these four things in place, I'm much more confident about spending the money. But that's very much, I know, from the perspective of an enthusiast, let's say.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's a particular audience that you're targeting, but you're also buying yourself security. If you bottle below 46% and you don't chill filter, there is a risk, and it's not just a small, in my opinion, it's not just a small risk.
Gregor is saying, Aquavite, question for Billy. Now my second favourite Billy. I'm going to suggest that it must be Mr. Connolly would be his first favourite Billy. This is Gregor McQuee coming in from Oregon in the west coast of the US, but he's an Edinburgh lad originally. And he's saying, can Billy take us through some of his epiphany whiskies over the years? Absolutely loving this chat. The community thanks you, Billy. Thank you, Gregor. That's a good question. Normally what I try to force out of somebody is to nail their kind of colours, to just give us one epiphany whiskey. Something that's really, if you close your eyes now, Billy, you can almost still taste it. Has it ever happened to you?
Yes, I think it has happened. But it was part of the Glenallachie journey, and some of the things that happen in your life, Roy, you can never quite understand how they happened. This will take a little bit of a while to answer, but it's worth waiting for.
We're going nowhere, Billy.
When we bought Ben Rea was a very interesting story because it had been established in 1898, but it only existed for 2 years, and then it became a victim of the Patterson crash, and it was mothballed until I think about 1966 when Chivas reopened it, and it was reopened again to participate in their greater blending experience for whatever brands they had, Something Special, Chivas Regal, Royal Salute, and it was a great distillery to become familiar with. It was a little belter, it had everything at its own maltings, which we got going again.
Yes.
But then we got to Glenallachie, and that was an interesting purchase because it came down again to safe hands. Chivas came and said, "Would you like to buy it?" And I thought, who would not? But not quite as enthusiastic as that to them. But I had known Glenallachie from my old Hiram Walker days or Valentine's days when they bought teachers. And Glenallachie was a particularly important ingredient in teachers at that time, and was a very richly sherried product at the time. When, as it changed hands and it lost its kind of focus because it was part of a much bigger team with lower hanging fruit, it became sidelined. And Glenallachie was, they closed it. It was mothballed for 6 years, and that always became a problem for big companies. But when we brought the 15-year-old Glenallachie to the market, that was an epiphany moment. That was a fantastic product.
I have to agree with you, and I've got an interesting take on that. We all knew, Billy, that in time, the 15-year-old was getting older and older and older, while it remained that 15-year-old age statement on there. This is something, I know I didn't want to focus on your legacy. I didn't want to focus on what's happened as a point of history for you now. But I'm curious about this. I have to say, I gave Glenallachie 15 my whiskey of the year last year because it's changed a wee bit. There's PX in there now, nothing wrong with that. But what they've proved is that they can still bring, based on the foundation that you perhaps put in there, that they are still bringing a fantastic product, fantastic presentation, all the ABCs are checked, and it's at £65, £70. And it's exclusively sherry matured. Everybody talks about this legendary 15-year-old with the Billy Walker name on it, and I don't think that's fair because you've openly said here that yes, that was an epiphany whiskey, and it was fantastic. But the only thing that's constant is change, and it couldn't endure. You were dipping into very old, mature stocks to make that, weren't you?
Yes, for my memory is that at one point it was probably 19 or 20-year-old.
The youngest component.
Yeah, but we did actually pull it for a couple of years, Roy.
Yes.
And I think that's when we introduced the 18-year-old, which is also a terrific product. But You know, the pleasure in all of this, both for the consumer and for the maker, is that when you get it right, it gives you a big smile, and it was a terrific product.
I have to say as well that it was a product that was able to straddle that perfect line between enthusiast and pretty much anybody coming into whiskey, or even the kind of occasional whiskey drinking father-in-law that you might buy a gift for or something. Glendronach 18 would be a perfect fit because despite the 46% ABV, it was very easy to enjoy for everybody to enjoy. I think it did very well, but it also was very. It was a very good value proposition to an enthusiast.
Yeah, well, it's important that products have got to be priced at a point where people can actually taste them, buy them and taste them. You know, if you put it out of the price reach of the people who actually understand whiskey, you're in trouble. Because if you're selling into people who can only buy it because they've got money, that's a fad. They will change. Their loyalty will go to somebody else very quickly. You need to engage with the people who are loyal to you and actually enjoy the product. And if you don't, if you forget that, then you're in trouble. You know?
You're preaching to the right. You're preaching to the choir here, Billy. Honestly, you're in the right audience. Well, these words that you're saying, I often wish that there could be more of that. I often wish there could be just more honesty, because I think there's a lot less to hide in whiskey than I think. Maybe I'm just being happily naive. There's a lot less to hide in whiskey that some of us might imagine. But I think what often happens is that people would prefer to put a positive spin on something rather than an honest spin. And I think that when the honest spin comes with education and insight, I think it's much, much more interesting.
Listen, at the end of the day, it's really important what you put into the bottle doesn't disappoint.
I think that goes back to that thing about if you enjoy it blind,
yeah,
you approach it and you go and you just enjoy the whiskey first. But I think if you're asking people to spend money and invest in something, I think that if you're honest about it, if all those ABCs are met, let's say, and as you mentioned, the price is a reasonable proposition as well, I think you are then fad proof. You're not going to become a fashionable thing. You're going to become an honest thing.
Yes.
There are distilleries out there that we could mention that have managed to achieve that perfectly well and prove that that's a real thing, a real dynamic.
Yes.
And I'm very excited that Glenallachie has been set up in that way as well. Will we move on to the 15 while we pick a couple of questions out of the chat? Whiskey Throttle is saying, take care of the customer and they will take care of you. That is a true traditionalist. Eric Cunliffe is saying a question for Billy. What inspired the Limerick series releases? So I think he's talking about the McNair's brand, isn't he? What is your favourite of the blends? And what is it about Kalila that makes it such a good bedfellow in a blend? Probably because it's available.
Well, that's certainly true, Roy. It's available, but it's pretty punchy.
Yep.
Kalila's a pretty punchy Isla, and the peat is get some very interesting stuff in Limerick, and there's some very interesting mainland distilleries.
So just for the folk that don't know, I believe that Limerick is a brand. Sorry, McNair's is a brand that's owned by you. One of the expressions is Limerick, which I believe to be a peated blended malt.
Peated blended malt, correct. And okay. And it has there's a couple of quite interesting peated Speysides in Limerick. I'm not going to disclose them tonight, but it was interesting. I have to say, it was very interesting when I saw what I was going to put into them.
There's a question actually out of the questions that I collected before we went live tonight, and a few people have asked this. Menno over in Belgium asked this, as well as Olaf and James Burgoyne all asked about one of the other brands that you inherited, a blend. And to have so many people asking about this caught me off guard because I hadn't really heard of White Heather.
Yeah, that is it, and we're very happy to have White Heather, and we're going to relaunch it at the tail end of this year as a 21-year-old, but it will be very limited volume. That's territory that we would be very uncomfortable tiptoeing into Royal Salute territory or Johnny Walker Blue Green territory. But White Heather, for many years, White Heather was the principal blended whiskey of Pernod. And before, in fact, it was a very important part of their portfolio until they bought Chivas. And then suddenly they had this array of fantastic blends. They had Chivas Regal, Royal Salute, Something Special. And then almost in jig time, they acquired Ballantine's. So suddenly they had Ballantine's fantastic blended whiskey. So White Heather came right down the pecking order. And interestingly, when we owned the bottling plant in Newbridge, we actually bottled White Heather, and then essentially it was taken off the market, or it was allowed to wither.
When was this? 90s?
No, this would be, we bottled White Heather probably last about 2014.
Oh wow!
But it was dwindling. It had been a big brand in South America, Australia, mainland Europe, particularly France, and we were tickled when we were able to get it, and indeed the inventory to support it. So the plan is, I've been doing a lot of work on just tweaking the blend. We put a vat together, some blended together. We put it into some very interesting wood, and we'll bring it to market tail end of this year or early next year, depending on how the current situation.
Sure.
But we are excited. We're not going to pour into blends. We're not going to into standard blend. That's competitively impossible for us. The 21-year-old fascinates and interests, and it'll be limited in maybe 2,000 cases a year, and we'll see how that journey goes. But it is nice and it's interesting, and just playing around with some of the older grains is it's quite interesting.
And is it going to be a malt heavy blend, or is it going to
Yes,
be?
It'll be probably be a 55-45, 55% grain, 45%.
45% malt. Interesting, very interesting. Jonathan Flowers is saying, what is Billy's favourite affordable offering from Glenallachie? Jonathan, I can answer that because I went to Billy and asked him. I've got the 12 on hand. I told him I had a single cask, this one that's sitting up here. This is Ralphie's single cask from last year. As I say, I had the 12, but I asked him, what should I get? And Billy said, probably the 15. That was your recommendation.
Yes.
And I've read up a wee bit on that, and you're actually quoted as referring to this as the crown jewels.
Yeah,
maybe. Just to show people, this is the 15-year-old Glenallachie.
Yeah, I've got it here too.
Lovely colour. Tells us, because we know it's natural colour, we can regard the colour and make an appraisal of it because we know that it's natural, which is wonderful. 46% ABV. This was a very good price. I think I paid, would £70 of that order sound right? I think it's in terms of a value prospect sitting on the shelf. I think it's one of these kind of almost no-brainers. I've not sipped it yet. I've not tried it. But to answer Jonathan Flower's question, would you propose that perhaps out of the current Glenallachie range, this would be your sweet spot, or would you perhaps guide people to the 12?
Well, listen, the 12-year-old, the come 12-year-old, the last batch we bottled is spectacular. It's fantastic. And but the 15-year-old fascinates me. I think 15-year-olds is a great age for whiskey.
Yes.
You can get into territory, Roy, 15-year-old and older, where you can find some disappointments, let's say, if you're not on top of managing the inventory. But the 15-year-old, first of all, there are very few 15-year-olds available now, and it is quite interesting what's happening in the industry. That a lot of companies were very, very focused on concentrating on age statements. And suddenly they weren't. But I think there's a certain integrity and honesty about age statements. And I think 15-year-old is a very, very interesting breakpoint in the maturation process, all things being equal.
Sweeping generalizations. We had this topic about a month ago on the vPub. This was the very subject we discussed, the sweet spot. And it basically, I just use it as a platform to tell everybody that my sweet spot was between 15 and 18. It's amazing the epiphany whiskies over my whiskey journey that have been 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old whiskies. And I have to say the majority tend to land around that 16-year-old mark. So that's what we have here. But this is kind of almost like a now for something completely different, because as I'm nosing this, it doesn't bear any resemblance to the, maybe with the exception of some quite sweet, juicy fruits that's in there. This is a completely different animal.
To the rye, sure.
To the younger, to the rye. Yeah.
Look, what were we expecting from this, Roy? We knew that the platform of flavours would be, the base flavours would be heather, honey, butterscotch, vanilla, orange zest. What do we want to bring with the experience in PX Noll? So we're going to get dried fruit, raisins, dark chocolate, mocha, maybe even some bananas, Christmas cake. That's what we're looking for in here, and there's quite a lot going on in here.
I have to say that I'm always, when I have a sherried whiskey like this, in recent times, I'm looking for, is it sweet and juicy and kind of toffee, round, mouth-filling things that you would maybe associate with American oak, or is it kind of spicy? Is there a bit of spice and prickle and tannic dryness there? And that's kind of what you're searching for. I would say that this kind of seems to ride right down the center of that. This has got both, and the spice really isn't there until the finish.
The spice is absolutely not there until the finish, and I think that's how it should be. Personally, I think that's how it should be in terms of how the flavours grade across your palate. There's always, but with Glenallachie and maybe with most whiskies, there's always a hint of orange zest, maybe even a touch of grapefruit. But
yeah. That's kind of what's bringing the freshness to it. But it's much more seductive. There's more kind of a cocoa coffee type notes in there. Maybe
it's not overwhelmingly sweet.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. It's plummy. Some nice plum jam, kind of.
Plummy damsonsy, yes.
Yep. Yes. I have to say that's my first ever sip of Glenallachie 15. It's completely different from the 12-year-old. And it's really interesting when you shared there earlier that when you talked about the PX makeup in the 12-year-old, because the 12-year-old is a very sweet whiskey. I've always felt it was very sweet. But I wondered if it was the ex-bourbon cask or virgin oak or something, or first fill bourbon that was bringing the sweetness. But potentially, did you say 65% PX?
70%
PX in the 12-year-old?
Yes.
Wow. So that's potentially where that kind of syrupy sweetness is coming from.
Syrupy, treacly, yes. But the latest 12-year-old, if you can get hands on it, is a belter.
I think that's what we're picking up on. That's maybe your current recommendation. Let's grab a couple of questions, Billy, if you're okay for it. Drinking Caveman Charles is in. Anyone know how distribution is like in the US for Glenallachie? I think I would know how to answer that one as well. Billy, how have you got on with the States?
States has been a challenge. We started life with Winebow, but for many reasons, not the least the most recent imposition of tariffs, we've moved now to Impex, who are a smaller company, and I think we will have not a better relationship, but we will have a different kind of relationship. I think we will see better distribution with more focus on single malt than on wine.
Okay, so for Charles, he could get a chance to get his hands on Glenallachie a wee bit easier in future.
Yes, he will, and I can tell him that the Impex have actually air freighted 800 a mix of 800 cases out this week. So they were keen to get their hands on the stuff.
Richie Z is asking if the Glenallachie PX10 is a US only release.
Difficult for me to answer that one. I'm not sure.
I can imagine there are a lot of regional releases for you at the moment.
I think David Keir could answer that better, but it could be because we decided that we would do quite a lot of the releases by region, so that each of the retailers could actually get a decent share of what are really very, very small casks and small.
Yes.
But America will not be deprived of single casks. The Impex are very, very energetic people, and they drill down to all levels of understanding of the brand and what we're trying to do. And yeah, you will definitely see some very interesting single casks there, exclusive to the United States.
I mean, that's the thing, is that a single cask is a single cask. Whatever it produces, that's it. It's gone. Which is why it's kind of often regional releases as well. Let me see if I... Blair Conrad asks, he said in an interview with the Scottish Licensed Trade News, we are introducing various yeast top dressings, and we have introduced a peated campaign. So there's two things there, okay, with the peated campaign, but yeast top dressings, Blair is asking specifically, what is a yeast top dressing?
I mean, what we want to do, we haven't done it yet, and we will do it during this campaign. It's just a shame a lot of what's happened with COVID has kind of created all kinds of obstacles. We'll look at some champagne yeasts, maybe some interesting red wine yeasts, some older natural styles of yeast rather than the very commercial yeasts that we're all kind of driven and focused into at the moment. I mean, I can remember when I first started out with Valentine's, we used to bub our own yeast. It wasn't always successful, I have to say. I can also remember things like we used to jump and cheer if we got a yield of 400 litres of alcohol per metric ton. Today you're getting 425, and a lot of that is driven by the barley varietals, where companies are more interested in yield, in getting maximum yield. I need to be careful with my words here, rather than necessarily getting the balance right between yield and...
I think their end goal is clearly different from yours.
Totally. And we would not be uncomfortable in trying to engage with farmers, for example, to try and retrace our steps, maybe not all the way back to Golden Promise, but to that kind of multi-barley varietal where the expectation is not to squeeze as much starch into the barley, and maybe to get a better balance in the product. So there's lots of things going on. The yeast thing we will definitely do over the next 6 to 8 months.
And is that industry terminology to call it yeast top dressing?
Yeah, I mean, it really is just about adding a different variety of yeast in a small way, and just to see if there's any additionality to it. I mean, it's not impossible that people will go back to bubbing yeast and have their own kind of unique genus of yeast. But it was operationally unwelcome because it was hard and it was something else to monitor. If you could actually contract that out to people who can do it professionally, but everybody getting the same yeast maybe is not the best idea. So look, we're looking at all these things. We'll look at the malted barley. We're going to look at the cut, and we've started that process. The middle cut from the stills. Are we taking it too early? Should we be giving it a little bit more higher alcohol? Bring it down from maybe 62.5 to, and we're doing these experiments at the moment, and we have filled off some casks to just monitor them and we'll watch them develop over the next 2 or 3 years. And going back to the reference to the peated campaigns, yes, we have. We started we did a peated campaign in 2018 and one in 2019. And interestingly, during both of these campaigns, we took during one of the periods, we took a very, very intense small cut from the distillate, which will have a phenols content of somewhere between 80 and 100 ppm. That's in virgin oak at the moment, and we're following that very closely. And frankly, it'll be to die for. But just remember, it's mainland peat, so it's a kind of sweeter style of peat. It came from the St. Fergus peat, whereas Isla is a much more kind of drier, iodine type
more
of
ashen, more kind of.
But
will that mean that your peated campaigns you'd be tempted to release at a more youthful age?
Well, there's always that temptation, Roy, but we will follow it. We won't put it into bottle until we believe it's right and the quality's right. But unquestionably with peat, and if you put it into the right kind of wood from day one, you've got a chance that you could bring a younger expression, maybe a 4 or 5 year old expression to the market. It's interesting with peat. The peat experience, the actual body of the peat, is probably more robust at a younger age. It does tend to fade as you mature it through to 12, 15, and 21. So yeah, look, we'll certainly we're having fun with that at the moment, and we'll do. In fact, when we start the distillery again, which is closed at the moment because of the current virus, and we've just taken the opportunity during this period to do all the maintenance work that we would normally do during the summer close down. So as soon as we start up, and I think we're going to start up in the first week in June, we're going immediately on to the peated campaign.
Good, excellent. I mean, there are some questions in here that covers exactly that, so we can skip by anybody that's asked about the peated things, or indeed how Billy's been affected by the current situation. I think he's just summarised it there. He's run through a maintenance style status right now with a view to starting up again in June. People are asking, people like Ard Baggy was asking about how the current situation is affecting you, and also a kind of a longer term thing about where you see, you've obviously referred to this malt boom, this premium whiskey boom that we've been enjoying since 2004 until now. Do you see that continuing, and where do you see whiskey in 10 years? So if we don't want to dwell too much in the current situation because we're here to escape that, but kind of extrapolate that forward and talk about how you see things being for Glenallachie in the next 10 years.
I think not just for Glenallachie, I think for most of the what I would define the kind of boutique operators, I think the market's quite strong, and I can see it growing. The world, there are still many parts of the world that we have an opportunity to engage with. We're only scratching the surface in China, and there is a huge appetite for single malt in China. There's a kind of, if in some way we could better engage with India, there's probably not enough whiskey, Scotch whiskey in warehouse to meet the demand that India could produce. Not that it will, Roy. That will never happen because of the punitive taxes that exist at the moment. But the appetite, I mean, in India, you've got a country of, what is it, 1 billion people. Something like, and I think this is true, something like $100 million millionaires. You know, the amount, the spending power in India is amazing. We do virtually nothing in Africa. I mean, if Africa could get together, there's opportunity there. As the markets and the category has developed, other markets have come onto the globe. You know, we'll get China, I think South Korea will be a very big single malt market. Up until now, it has been unquestionably a blended whiskey market, but I think it will become quite a big single malt market. Hong Kong's big, Japan is big, Russia will become much bigger, Ukraine. I remember visiting Kazakhstan 5-6 years ago. Kazakhstan is a huge amount of wealth in Kazakhstan, and they like whiskey, and it will develop there as well. So a lot of these markets are in their infancy. So although there will be many obstacles along the way, and not the least of which is the current problem, and not the least of which is the difficulties that with the tariffs in the United States, and indeed perhaps the difficulties that we're going to be confronted with Brexit. I am still very hopeful for the future of the Scotch whisky industry, and in particular the single malt sector.
I have to say, I am hopeful too, but I'm very glad that you have capacity, that you're running about 600,000-700,000 litres against the capacity of 4 million, because if any of those markets do suddenly become activated, I'm really worried about what's going to be left for us.
I don't. The charm in all of that, Roy, is I don't think that's the kind of level that we would engage with or want to engage with. There is something really exciting and enjoyable about operating at a particular level with a customer base and a route to market where it's fun and people have an enthusiasm for it and they buy it to drink it, and that's a big plus.
And not only drink it, but use it as a kind of social connection, use it as something to talk about. I mean, whiskey fires passions in ways that I find almost just as fascinating as enjoying the whiskey sometimes, honestly. I think it's an amazing thing. Is it okay to go completely geeky on a question here? This is from one of my patrons, Billy. This is from Russell Varshay, who says, Billy took over Glendronach after they switched from direct firing. What's his opinion of direct firing versus steam coil or steam jacket?
Look, direct firing had a lot of attractions. You could fire up quickly, but it had a lot of negatives as well. I mean, clearly was unsafe, or it was presumed to be unsafe. So the kind of lens was always going to be shone on that by the health and safety executive. Would I want to continue with direct firing? Absolutely. I think it would be a nice twist, a nice tweak. I didn't have the opportunity to run Glenallachie with direct firing. It had moved to indirect heating by that time. But I thought one or two are still doing it, but they will be. It's so difficult to do it now, and there were some problems in the past.
Yep.
There were some good old days, but in the good old days, there was a lot of drinking went on in the industry, including the operatives.
Yes. Back when direct firing was much more common, of course, as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it would add other complications and things to get your head around as well, like how rummagers or whatever it may be inside the still or whatever. But what's in place at Glenallachie now then? Is it steam coil?
It's steam coils and some pans.
And some pans. I hope that answers your question, Russell. And one more from the community as well. We might have touched on this ever so slightly briefly, but this is from Shiv Joshi. Shiv is asking Billy, what is his favourite cask maturation? Again, if you're forced to pick one, Billy, I know it's tough.
If the question is what is the most interesting cask, rather than the favourite cask, the one that interests me most at the moment are the Chinkapin casks, the virgin casks that we're buying from Missouri. These casks deliver the most amazingly rich flavour. Now, they're virgin casks. They've been air dried for about 48 months.
Wow.
They are medium toast, medium char, and they deliver the most amazing licorice anise notes. But you have to monitor them. You have to catch them on the sweet point. These are casks that can, seriously overcook. But what you get from them in the period during the 18 months, probably 12 to 18 months that you're exposing the whiskey to, you get some amazingly rich flavors, and definitely licorice and mint and anise notes. Very different from conventional Appalachian oak.
So I'm trying to remember the name. It's Quercus alba is obviously the traditional American oak, but it started with an M. Quercus malingeperis. Perry or something. But I remember we had a discussion that it was Isle of Rassay Distillery was super excited about what this oak was doing to their spirit as well. So it's interesting that you say that. And of course, that's perfectly within SWA regulations because it remains oak.
Yeah, but if you're asking what is my favourite cask, unquestionably it's PX and Oloroso, because they are going to deliver the house style.
PX and Oloroso favourite. Interestingly, Chinkapin for curiosity and experimentation.
And different, absolutely.
Jimmy Legg has been cheeky and asking, how good are they on second fill? I guess you don't know yet.
No, but from previous experience, sherry casks on second fill are actually quite interesting. They continue to deliver some actually quite rich flavour notes, but they will not deliver colour. There's a much lighter colour development than with the first fill.
Similar to American oak.
Similar to American, correct.
Lee J. Brown is saying, sorry, well, it just jumped there. Sorry, Lee J. What is the right age, multi-mission, this is from Menno in Belgium, what is the right age for an oak tree to be turned into a cask?
Oh, my goodness.
I know, that's it's kind of like when it's big enough to make it economically viable, surely, so it's got to be... I mean, I guess the interesting side to that question is if we're harvesting from sustainable oak right now and we're replanting 2 or 3 trees based on one that is cut down, how long is it going to take before maturity? I think we're at 60 to 80 years or something.
Oh, I think you're at least that, Roy. You're certainly in the 60-year bracket. In fact, in Spain, Spanish oak is quite difficult to get now because it's regulated and they are limited to much timber they can actually harvest.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just so conserved right now. I'm going to ask one more question from my patrons, and then I'll jump into the crowd quickly to say, okay, Malt Review, Jason at Malt Review was asking, he doesn't have a very kind opinion towards the Glenallachie branding, and he's asking if you're going to stick with it or if you've got plans to change it.
That's an extremely difficult question, and I know that the marketing department are listening to this, so I have to be...
No doubt.
Look, you either like it or it's like anything, any branding, you may like it or you may not like it. I have to say it's grown on me. It wasn't probably my typeface of choice. But, you know, I kind of see past that, and I hope that the kind of whiskey aficionados see past it too. For me, it's all about what's in the bottle.
I have to say I feel the same. I do have opinions about my day job is that very thing, is branding and aesthetics, and we are emotionally affected by these things more than we might care to admit, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that if we were to list our top 5 whiskies as enthusiasts and then ask the same question again and say how many of those top 5 do you actually care how they're presented and branded, how they look aesthetically, we would admit that we don't care a jot about any of them. And I'm thinking about a couple of distilleries at the forefront of my mind that put very little effort into their branding, and yet they remain very, very close to our hearts. So I think that what you say is right, that you see past it now. You've gone past.
In fairness, Roy, what I would say to Jason is that I hear what he's saying, and he is not alone. There will be other people who would share that view. So look, whatever people say both about the liquid and the materiality of the packaging, we listen to people. We're not stupid, but my job is to make sure that what goes in the bottle doesn't disappoint. And it's the constant pursuit of excellence. So, Jason, we will look at the packaging. We're always looking at things.
I don't even think that the guys over at Malt Review even score based on the branding and the labeling. They're fully focused on the liquid inside the bottle as well. But it's an interesting thing to ask, I think. Eric Evanson is asking about the distribution in the States. We did answer that a wee bit earlier, Eric. There's good news for you in the times ahead. You should see more Glenallachie available pretty soon. Zach Andrews has bought me a dram saying, wonderful and informative stream as always. And prayers for Scotch on the Bay. That's we're thinking about Leanne Rayner, one of our community. Our dad's in a wee bit of trouble right now. He's facing some health issues. And absolutely, Zach, I'll echo your sentiment and raise a glass and hope that Leanne and her family are all doing very well. Cheers.
Yeah.
Shiv is saying, hi Roy, another question for Billy. Why the capital? I knew this was coming up. Why the capital letter? You obviously, we know it from Benriach, and you've taken that into Glenallachie as well.
I think...
Is it a Billy Walker thing? Can we ask?
Well, it was me initially, but it also was... It's a moment in time that we took ownership, so we changed the name a wee bit. We changed just a wee bit.
So it's become an in thing, right?
It's just a wee twist.
And we recognise it. And it's certainly become a legacy, absolutely. Russell Whisky is saying, Aquavita, the bottle used by Glendronach, Anna Kilkerran and others is my favourite because it says our whiskey is so good that we don't have to scream for attention. I mean, I think I have to say that the Glenallachie bottle, in terms of bottle style and shape, it's maybe a bit more Bell style, but it's fairly traditional whiskey bottle in that respect. But I understand exactly what you're talking about, Russell. Rucher Lax is saying, nice. Rucher, I recently worked out that your name is based around, I think, in German. Perhaps that is smoked, or Rucher is smoked or smoker. Nice packaging helps in travel retail with the uninformed buyer, but the anoraks only care about what's in the bottle. I think most of the dialogue that you've heard tonight, you would probably work out through Billy's language about selling through smaller independent retailers, getting to market that way, and trying to engage with a knowledgeable and enthusiastic crowd. We can see that that's absolutely what their focus is. Nigel Slynn is saying, question for Billy, the label on the bottles of current Glenallachie state that the whiskey was made using a process of slow fermentation. Was the existing stock made this way before he arrived?
No, I doubt it.
So you're down at 160 hours now?
160 hours, yes.
Is that right across the board, or do you have shorter fermentations that you've
had? Well, if it's a short fermentation, it will be 140 hours. But depending on the cycle, it'll be between 140 and 160 hours.
Yeah. Okay, so there you go. The whiskey that Billy envisages for Glenallachie's future could end up being, and that's quite interesting because you used a number at the start of the stream, Billy, if you don't mind me going back to that, 85% you mentioned. You feel like you've managed to get 85% there with the depth of stocks that you have on hand.
Yes.
With the investment that you're putting into caring for these stocks, to casking these stocks, and obviously making the whiskey and bottling them. What is the next 15% for you? What would you like to achieve there? It's tough, isn't it?
It's a kind of roundness, additionality in terms of roundness. It's difficult just to put my finger on it, but it will. It's difficult to say in words what I'm pursuing here, but where we are in terms of the flavour experience, the overall rounded nose and flavour experience is almost there. Maybe it's a little bit longer in the casks. Maybe we have to tweak a little bit the formulation, and we're constantly looking at that. But I think, in my own mind, if we believe that if we settle for where we are, then that's not good enough. We need to be pushing the envelope constantly to get to perfection.
Yes, and I think that in that pursuit of perfection, we're hoping for some incidental benefits, some serendipity to kick in and make some fantastic products that could complement the core range in the future, perhaps, right? With your yeast, your barley, your fermentation, your experimental oak, everything that you're doing there.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of things that we're doing that we will look at and say, look, how's this going to assist us? How's this going to help us? And even the the rye wood experience. There are other things that we would want to do with that. Some of that could end up in the product, in the core range product eventually. But who knows? But if you don't buy the ticket, you don't get on the train.
That's a nice sentiment. Absolutely. Rookerlax is telling me that his name is German for smoked salmon, but asking that I just call him Thomas, like everybody else does. Fantastic. Finally, Gregor is saying, well, 15 to 18 might be a magical number for your dram. Billy's passionate 75 is inspiring in itself. You've made a fanboy of this Edinburgh laddie. Wow. That's a wonderful sentiment. I have to say, I think that there's no doubt that that's happened tonight, that you've, Billy, you've been remarkably open and candid, remarkably welcoming and accommodating of concepts that are quite difficult to talk about in some of the legacy that Scotch whisky is operating in, honestly speaking. But the more that we talk about it, the more understanding of where it's come from, where it's going, and where we are right now can be understood a bit better. Tim Donnerpass Whisky is saying, hi Roy and Billy, great job so far, taking existing stock and finishing in high quality wood. In the future, will your whisky be aged its whole life in the same casks? Joining late, I don't think you would restrict yourself necessarily in that way, would you?
No,
that's Tim over in the States.
What I would say is that you're absolutely right. Some of it will be in the same wood from birth, absolutely. But we will not restrict ourselves. But some of it will definitely be will spend its whole existence in the same wood.
Can we finish on a killer question, Billy? Kresimir Jelcic is saying, best dram ever, Mr. Walker.
Best dram ever. There was. I don't have enough experience now with my the current distillery. But I have to tell you that there was a 1976 Ben Riach that if you can ever get your hands on it, is not just to die for. You would just die. It was so good. And interestingly, one of the characteristics, the flavour characteristics in it was pineapple. And it's in older whiskey that has matured in the proper way, in the right wood and in the right microclimate, pineapple is a significant presence in some of these really, really good old expressions. In 1976, Ben Riach was fantastic.
Interestingly, one of your peers over at Tomatin, Graham Unson, he talks about his Epiphany cask being a 1976 cask as well. Sounds like a very similar scenario as well that he's been able to taste from. I wonder.
And it might represent the period. It might represent the barley that was being used. It might represent the yeast that was being used. But I can tell you that the 1976 whiskey was just stunning, and all of the casks. It wasn't just one specific cask. All of this kind of parcel was just to die for.
I wonder what the joining fee is going to be for that, Billy, to get your hands on a bottle of 1976 Ben Riach. Lots of positive comments coming in, Billy. People are really happy to have listened to you tonight. Thanks to Billy for tuning in the vPub into a masterclass. That's from Russell Whisky. Everyone is saying this was a wonderful stream. Thank you. Great job. You're getting great at interviewing. I have a lot of work to do, everyone, but I'm grateful for your compliments. Thank you, my friend. Tony Evans is saying, please ask Billy to come back. I could never tire of listening to him. Multi Mission is saying, your previous remark got me thinking, Roy, where does that reluctance in the industry about being open about whiskey come from? I think just so many concepts about whiskey, Menno, need a wee bit of understanding, a wee bit of context and information, and sometimes that's difficult. It's not unique to whiskey, but it's something that, especially as a community, we can do a lot to help along. Jimmy Legg is saying, not asking him about the rum. Jimmy, I caught your rum question. I think it was a very interesting question. I was far too worried about it being a tangent. But of course, we have potential of rum on the horizon. Have you got a quick answer for Jimmy Legg, Billy?
Yeah, listen, I think rum is going to be an interesting category. I think I need to choose my words very carefully. I think the bigger companies in the rum industry could be doing a better job for the category. I think the opportunity for small boutique releases is exciting. Some of the Belgium is a very interesting market if you want to test the product. People in Belgium have a great attitude to life. They like eating, they like drinking. They're not obsessed with property ownership. If you want it, and there's a lot of private restaurants and bars. So if you want to test a product, Belgium is a great place to test it. And I've seen a lot of interesting rums and rum derivatives being sold in the Belgian market. So I think rum could be an interesting thing in the next 5 to 10 years. Where we want to be with it is to be in it. We're importing some mature rum and some younger rum, and we are twisting it in some very interesting wood. And when it's ready, and I think some of it will be ready in the quarter 1 or quarter 2 of next year, we will test the market with it. But you know what? Some of it will be great, and there's going to be a really nice twist with a peated rum.
Peated rum.
So that's rum.
All the Belgians out there, there are many of you. You guys will probably hear it first.
So there's rum that's maturing away in some peated whiskey casks, and I've been following them. And you know what? It's wonderful. They really are terrific. So look, there's lots of nice things going on, but we can do, because we are so small, we can try these things, and we can even test market them. And I'm pretty confident the rum experience will work okay. It's just being patient. I'm not very good at patience, but it's being patient and testing them in the right market.
Fantastic. I'm going to read out a few comments. There's lots of comments of thanks coming in, Billy. I'll read them out to you before you go. But what normally happens now is we do a kind of quiz at the end, but that's fully optional for you, my friend. You're completely off hire now. I'll just read out some thanks to you from the community. Lots of people really excited that you came along tonight, and said Jean de la Cuisine is saying very informative and charming guest once again. Thanks, Jean de la Cuisine. Thank you, my friend. Ben Marnick is saying, is another fascinating night, keeping me up after bedtime again. Thanks to Billy. Tremendous. You're very welcome, Ben.
And me.
That's right. Exactly on point. Exactly right. Ross Fudd is saying, thank you, Mr. Walker. Kresimir is saying, Mr. Walker, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see, is there anybody else? Have to review Billy's comments. Listen, that's the great thing about YouTube, Hoyt, is that this thing is here to watch over again and redigest. Lots of food for thought, lots of nice discussion come out. But I think there's a couple of things I've taken from tonight, Billy. Number one is how candid and open you've been, as I've already mentioned. But the other thing is how sharp you are, and there is no sign of you, when I talked about those whiskey boots at the start of the stream being hung up, there is no sign of that happening anytime soon. If your everything you talk about is in the future. Everything is.
I do have to say, Roy, though, that we started our own new fill in 2017. I do want to be around to put it into a bottle when it's 12-year-old.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I sent you the article that I shared with my patrons earlier today. I kind of shared that article with you, and I said, look, I've put this out to patrons, Billy, just as a kind of heads up. And I talked about that idea. Maybe one day, because I used the analogy of my son, raising my son, and you raising this whiskey. And I thought about that maybe one day my son and I could be enjoying a whiskey together, and not only just kind of appraising the whiskey, but appraising what I'd managed to achieve as a parent, raising him with this whole homeschooling theme right now. And that thought was very much in the forefront of my head, that maybe one day, as we raise a glass together, it will actually be a Glenallachie that Billy Walker has been responsible for not only creating, but actually distilling and making as well.
That would be fantastic. For me, that would be fantastic, Roy. And if there's any sign of me croaking, I will be bringing it to the market before that.
So if we see a young Glenallachie suddenly appearing, we need to be worried. Listen, Billy, I'm going to raise this glass to your health now and to your long-term health, to everything that you've brought to us in the past that we're very grateful of. One Distillery, I've already mentioned to you before we went live that you were fundamental in reviving. We haven't even spoke about it tonight, but it's a question in the quiz, so I'll leave it for later. I'm very grateful to you for so many things. I'm grateful to your drive, for your passion, and I'm very grateful to your to your appetite for everything in Whisky's future as well. Thank you for joining us tonight, Billy Walker. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
There's a quiz, Billy. You're going to just drop into the background. If you stay around, fantastic. If not, we can have a catch up and a debrief anytime at some point in the future. Yeah. But thank you for making your bedtime a wee bit later than normal.
It's well by my bedtime, Roy. Anyway, thanks for having me, guys, and thanks for being patient.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you, Billy.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Wonderful stuff. I hope you enjoyed that. Absolutely fantastic to have Billy in. And genuinely, he was super keen to join us, super keen to come along and hang out with us for a while. And he didn't care what we spoke about. There was no agenda. He was happy to talk about anything that you brought. And then I told him what time it was going out, and obviously it was really quite late. And that's the thing about the vPub, it is quite late. I know it's late for so many Europeans as well, but what I try to do is bring out a vPub at a time where I can speak to the audience, and the audience is global. So much of us are in Europe, so much of us are in North America as well. I've got a quiz for you tonight. If you're interested in hanging around, I'm going to try and keep this under 2 hours tonight and get it done in the next 15 minutes. Let's see if we can achieve that. Neil Cochrane is saying, Aqua Vitae, as you say, Roy, the water is warm. Absolutely welcome in. Wonderful to have had Billy too. So we're just going to go straight into the quiz, and we'll get the quiz sorted. If there's any time at the end, I can chat to you then. But I really enjoyed myself tonight. That was a comfortable, relaxed, an enjoyable discussion for me as a whiskey enthusiast, as somebody who's very passionate about the liquid that we all enjoy. Let's jump into this quiz. There's a few kind of housekeeping things that I wanted to talk about. The first one, just let me mention again, my birthday gifts. They are still turning up even now. My birthday is well past now, it's gone. Thank you all so much for your generosity. The way I'm going to work this is I'm going to just get the liquid gifts, let's say, together on a private stream for patrons, and we're just going to hang out, and I'm just going to open them and enjoy them. And some of these gifts that you've bought for me have been absolutely amazing. Luna Aaron, Rico Denert, Marcus Kreitner and Whiskey Jason over in Germany and Austria got together to buy me a Glenallachie 24-year-old sample. They bought the bottle based on a sample that I tried, and it knocked me sideways. They bought the bottle for me. Sevi the Alchemist bought me a tasting set of mature, very mature Glenallachie and Brora. This includes Brora in there as well. I'm absolutely blown away by your generosity. It's wonderful to witness. And of course, Doc, Macallan Fine and Rare. I opened a package that took longer to get here, and I unearthed a bottle of 1970 distillate north of Scotland single grain whiskey at 41 years old from Macallan Fine and Rare in Germany. It's difficult for me to talk about this without getting emotional about it. Your generosity never, ever ceases to amaze, whether it's gifts to me, whether it's generosity towards the community, good causes, whatever it is. You're wonderful, wonderful whiskey folk, and I'll never tire of thanking you for it. Hoyt has bought me a dram and said, received the package today. Great guest tonight, Hoyt. I'm so glad you got your package. A note on that as well. Most people are going to have packages turning up. They're taking a bit longer to get there. Certainly they're taking longer for me to get out right now. I'm up to date now. Got a couple of packages sitting here to go. Maybe tomorrow, Saturday morning, those will go out. But there's lots of people who've been waiting far too long from me for things. I always thank you for your patience. It's just kind of the way it is just now, because I've got the kids here. I'm maybe getting out once a week if I'm lucky to make shipments. And even getting time to sit down and concentrate and put everything together and respond to all the comments, it's taken much longer as well. I'm doing my wee best. Thank you all so much. Let's jump into this quiz. Thank you. Of course, the quiz at the end is always multiple choice, and it is tonight as well. There is a theme tonight. There's a few questions in there that's going to be revolving around Billy, but only 3 or 4. The rest of them are regular vPub questions. I wish everybody best of luck. And the pass mark tonight is, I'd say, 5 out of 10, since it's an easy one, of course. Good luck, everybody. Billy Walker is partially responsible for the rebirth of which of these Highland distilleries? Is it A, Edredar, B, Deanston, or C, Tullibardine? Richie Z is saying the quiz is easy. Right, Rich. That's right. Exactly right. Ronald is saying, let me guess, an easy quiz again. Yes, genuinely, that tonight's quiz is easy. Whiskey Jason is in. Good to have you, Whiskey Jason. Good to have Steve in his way. He's saying, right, Stevie, out in the States. Fantastic, Steve. No, is it a Speyside game tonight? Of course. I wanted to dedicate the time fully to Billy Walker tonight, but we can pick that up again on Sunday. Wow. Wow, there's more of a spread than I imagined here, honestly. Zach Andrews saying, I picked up some of that 19-year-old Clynelish for $46. Wow, is that I can't even remember which brand it was. Is that from Total Wine? When I was out there, Zach, it was amazing. The words of death, Bud Jenkins is saying easy quiz. Well, let's see what you're saying. By far, the majority of you have plucked it out. Absolutely. It's Deanston. Billy Walker in 1990 was responsible, partly with the team at Burn Stewart at the time, for reviving Deanston, which had been closed for 8 years at that time. And how grateful are we that that happened? Question 2. In which year was Brora, then named Clynelish, finally connected to the electrical grid? When did Clynelish get connected to the electrical grid? Was it A, 1896, B, 1931, or C, 1960? I'm looking for Jimmy Legg, who's going to call me out for being, he's going to say this is an asshat question, but I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting. And Zach is saying Lonach was the brand, and yes, it is the same. Picking up the Capardonic too. The Capardonic was only $60. It was a 23-year-old Capardonic for $69, $70 or something like that. Unbelievable. And I spoke to the guy in the shop, and he was like, people just don't know what Capardonic is here. If I could have shipped it home bulk, I would have done that. It was 46% ABV as well. I bought a bottle of it, and we shared it at the event there. We opened it, everybody drank it, and I kind of wish I had it on hand. The 19-year-old Clynelish was a nudge better, to my memory. Christopher is saying, come on, Aquavite. I can tell you that it was 1960. Now, back in the days, Brora didn't exist back in 1960. Brora was just the town that the distillery lived in. The distillery was always known as Clynelish, but obviously they made a new distillery and called that Clynelish. They had Clynelish 1 and 2, and then eventually they called Clynelish 2, which was the original Clynelish, Brora. But it took until 1960 for them to move away from being locally sourced coal-fired to being connected to the grid. 1960. It's quite incredible. But it's a marker of how far north that distillery is as well. Even when you get up to Inverness, you've still got a fair hike to get up to Clynelish and Brora. Question 3, another Billy Walker question. During his reign with Ben Riach Distillery Company, Billy Walker devised how many expressions called revival? During Billy Walker's reign, how many expressions came out called revival? A1, B2, or C3? Let's see how you score on this one. Huh. Where are the emojis tonight? Has no one got access to emojis? I'm looking for bananas. This is a wee bit of a banana skin, I'm afraid. Some of you, Kilted Moose, Ronald, Vassal, that looks like a new name. Glagola, Luna Aaron. Here come the emojis now. Absolutely, it is a banana skin. There's only one that Billy Walker was responsible for. The 15-year-old Glendronach was called Glendronach Revival. You're thinking of Glenglassaugh was also called Revival, but that was one that he inherited that had already been released before he took ownership of Glenglassaugh, which is why they had two expressions called Revival. So there we go. Dogs have no uncles. You need to send me an email. Dogs have no uncles. You need to send me an email at whisky@aquavitae.com because you won a prize in it's a Speyside competition and we don't have any way to get in touch with you. So reach out to me on whisky@aquavitae.com and we'll sort you out with your prize. Well done. Question 4. Which of these Duffton distilleries, how many minutes have we got left? Oh dear. Which of these Duffton distilleries became a church and brewery during the mid-19th century? Notice I've spelt Duffton correctly tonight as well. I can tell you that your options are A, Pittyveich, B, Parkmore, and C, Mortlach. 2 closed distilleries, 1 still very much in operation. But which of these 3 Duffton distilleries was a brewery and a church for a little while in the mid-19th century? A, Pittyveich, B, Parkmore, or C, Mortlach? Jimmy Legg is saying time means nothing. Do you know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right. But it's nice to get sleep, genuinely. Erwin, thank you so much for your recent support, my friend. Erwin thinks it's C, Mortlach. The Whiskey Dram Daniel thinks it's A. Brian Berenicky thinks C. Steve A is A. Wow, this is all over the place. Des thinks B. Sid Martin thinks B. Sid, you always score quite well. Is it B? You're thinking it's Parkmore. A. Jude thinks C. Kresimir is saying we are all over the place. Indeed, you are. But you should have a wee think about it. Pittyveich opened in the 70s and closed in the 80s. It made gin in the 90s, but really it was just a flash in whiskey's pan. Parkmore opened in the late 19th century and closed around about the 1930s, I think. Still remarkably well preserved up there in Duffton. The only one that was actually open in the mid-19th century was Mortlach. And for a period there, just running up to around about 1850 or thereabouts, it was a brewery and a church for a while. Sorry. Have a look at the picture question tonight. And I'm going to ask you simply just what distillery are we looking at there? Are we looking at A, Glen Grant, B, Glenkinchie, or C, Deanston? Are we looking at a Speyside distillery in Glen Grant, a Lowlands distillery in Glenkinchie, or are we looking at a Highland distillery in Deanston? What are we looking at? Gabriel Welding is having a go at me, saying 2 out of 4, yes, easy quiz indeed. Sorry, Gabriel, but it's nice to have you participate. Marcus saying, no rush, not even at 2 o'clock here, and 2 out of 4. I know it's later for so many of you as well. I should just go with it. 6 minutes till 2 hours. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Wow, you're a wee bit over the place here. I thought you would nail this. I think so many of you will have been to visit this distillery because of how easy it is to access from Edinburgh. We are indeed looking at Glenkinchie, just south of Edinburgh. I've never approached Glenkinchie from this direction. Normally the bus drops you up at a car park, just up, and you walk down and you come in to the left-hand side here from the back of the distillery. But we're looking at Glenkinchie here. So if you answer B, give yourself a point. You're all keeping your score. Oh, wow. I'm in trouble tonight. I'm looking for a 5 out of 5. Wolfburn, question 6. Wolfburn was famously built in around 60 days. What about Speyside Distillery in Kingussie? How long did it take to build Speyside Distillery? Whisky Malt Content. So nice to have you in. We dram to you, my friend. Cheers from Birmingham with Cotswold peated cask rise. Vlad. Of course it's Vlad, isn't it? You mentioned to me that that's how I would recognise you on YouTube as well. Vlad, I'm looking after your messages and packages, my friend. Thank you so much for your virtual dram. Sláinte. How long did it take Speyside? Was it A, 98 days, B, 9 months, or C, 29 years? So we've got days as an option, months as an option, or years as an option. 90 days, 9 months, or 29 years. Alistair Gray is saying he's drinking a spey just now. I wonder which expression. Fumare? I actually tried recently an age-stated one at the Stirling Festival last year. It was poured by Mark Connolly, and I actually really enjoyed it. James McGorran is asking 29 years. Oof. Whiskey Novice is suggesting that this could be a banana skin. Listen, so many of you nailed it. Tim Allott, Luna Aaron, James Alsop, Dominic Urban, Peter Box, Dancing Midgie Glenn, Paul Ritchie Z, Shane Lay, Espen Anderson, Rooker Lax, Alistair Gray. So many of you know, yes, indeed. Started in 1962, and it took until 1990 before it was actually running Spirit. Took a while for them to get Speyside open. Question 7. Which of these is an Oregon-based single malt distillery? My wife helped me put this question together, and she still got it wrong. Question 7. Is it A, Chicken Run, B, Bull Run, or C, Rabbit Run? I would imagine that Gregor McQueen might get this right, but I'm not sure. It's one of these kind of boutique, small-scale distilleries, single malt distillery out in the States. Is it A, Chicken Run, B, Bull Run, or C, Rabbit Run? Multi-Mission is saying the McQueen distillery, surely. I don't even know if Gregor is still here, but he's probably away Googling, so he doesn't have any egg in his face when we're speaking about a local distillery. Lots of people think C, Rabbit Run. Some people think B, Bull Run. And some do think A. Wow. Some banana skins in here tonight, right enough. Anthony Dunn has bought me a dram. Do I get any points for participating in the quiz? My easy is different than yours, Royce. Lol. Back to the MRV 2018 work tomorrow, so 40% is the choice. Anthony, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for your dram. Cheers. It's really anybody that's ever put together a quiz. Somebody just sent in quiz questions today. Actually, I didn't even get a chance to look at them. Anybody that's ever tried to put together a quiz questions, it's difficult to pitch. Somebody's easy is different from my easy, of course. Some things that I can consider difficult, other people just know as common knowledge. I can tell you that indeed it's B, Bull Run. So if you answered B, give yourself a point. Moving on to question 8. Which independent bottler is organising a World Whisky Summit for World Whisky Day? That's this Saturday, World Whisky Day at 7 p.m. I'm not doing anything for World Whisky Day on Saturday with the 2 live streams that's going out a week just now. With everything else that's going on, it's just a bit crammed. I would love to take World Whisky Day just to relax a wee bit and enjoy a whiskey. I hope you don't mind that. For all my patrons out there, I am locking in a very imminent, as I've already teased, to talk about these gifts and things that's been bought for me, an imminent lock-in. But other than that, the next time I'll see you is Sunday. And then, of course, a week from tonight, we'll be welcoming in Julian Fernandez from Distell. Is it A, Douglas Lang, B, SMWS, or C, that boutique whiskey company? Which independent bottler is organising a World Whisky Summit for World Whisky Day? If you go to their website, once you discover what the answer is, there's a link to follow. It looks like it's going out live on Facebook from what I can determine, but I'm not 100% sure. But it might be a fun distraction for you on Saturday evening. If you turn up in the stream, say hello to Dr. Sam Simmons and to Boutique Dave from Aquavitae, and you might find that I'm there alongside you, just depending on how my Saturday night goes. It is, of course, Boutique Whiskey Company. If you answered C, give yourself a point, and I might bump into you all over the weekend if you're there. Shimini Charlie's in. Kino Got, I think is her name. She's saying yes, it will be streamed on Facebook. Absolutely. In 2019, Glenallachie won Distillery of the Year at the Scotch Whisky Awards, as well as what else? What else did they win that year? The Icons of Whisky Master Blender, the Icons of Whisky Brand Innovator, or the Icons of Whisky Best Single Malt Scotch. 2019 was a pretty good year for Glenallachie. So not only did they get a Distillery of the Year at the Scotch Whisky Awards, but at Whisky Magazine's Icons of Whisky Awards, they either got A, Master Blender, B, Brand Innovator, or C, Single Malt Scotch. What do you think? Ooh, I predict we could have a low-scoring quiz tonight. Have I pitched it a wee bit tricky for you? Perhaps. Perhaps. Yes, you're all over the place. Still, it's good when you're all over the place because there's less Googling and more genuine just answering. Because it's okay to have some crappy scores or not brilliant scores all the time. And Ralphie Whiskey of the Year 2019 to James Alsop is saying, I can tell you that the gentleman that's just been on tonight was awarded the Icons of Whiskey Master Blender of the Year, Distiller / Master Blender of the Year. Wonderful accolades and recognition for Billy's efforts. And I think you could probably pick up from tonight that he's very deserving of it as well. Okay, how are we doing tonight? Is there anybody on 9 out of 9? Jan-Paul van der Hoven is crying. He's not happy on 4 out of 9. You've still got a chance of a pass mark, my friend. Petehead is on 6 out of 9. Whiskey Novice is doing all right on 7. Peter Box is doing excellent on 8. Peter, I don't think I can see anybody doing any better than that tonight. Daniel Vermas is saying yes. Don't know what that means, Daniel. You always score really, really well. Falsgraf, 7 out of 9. Where is the capital A, Roy? Big Joe Bob, Joe Galbraith is picking me up on my spelling of Glenallachie. Absolutely right. Let me off. It's a branding thing, surely. We don't need to start writing Glenallachie with a capitalised middle A. Maybe we do. Thomas in Germany is saying, what about Stefan Novak's quiz Sunday? Stefan Novak's quiz I shared on, his bourbon quiz I shared on Patreon. So what I did is I put that out to patrons first. There was a wee prize for patrons in there. And once they've finished it and that's done, I'm going to release that as kind of publicly. I'll just put a public link in under the Chad and Sarah video. I think that's what you're talking about. I hope that's right, Thomas. Anyway, let's go into the last question and wish you all luck. Anybody that's on 4 could maybe get a pass mark. Maybe no, could be a tricky one. The remote Highland Park Distillery on Orkney malts how much of its own barley? How much barley, production barley, does Highland Park malt in-house? Is it A, less than 10%, B, around 30%, or C, more than 50%? It's interesting. I've used this recently to talk about a couple of distilleries. Obviously, Springbank does all of its own. Bamor does some of its own. Lafroig does some of its own. Benriach, as we heard tonight, does some of its own. But we're talking about Highland Park. A, less than 10%, B, around 30%, or C, more than 50%. So what I'm going to say is A, suggests that it's a tourist attraction only. B, suggests that it makes some difference, significant difference in the distillate. And C, suggests that it makes a really impactful difference on the distillate. I can tell you its remoteness suggests some, but not a lot. Everyone is saying, Jimmy Legg is saying, is there something happening tomorrow night concerning last Saturday's lockdown whiskey festival? Yes, Jimmy Legg, I love you. Thank you so much. I've forgotten. It's even written down here. I forgot to mention it. For all of your generous donations to the Maggie's Highland campaign, we all donated so much to that. You're a marvelous community. What you've done there is amazing. But you all have a chance now to win all of the whiskey that was put in. And it's been drawn on the softer sessions on Tomatin's channel tomorrow evening. So subscribe to Tomatin, set a reminder on the notification bell or whatever you have to do, and see if your rewards for your very, very generous donations is going to be coming back to you in the form of whiskey. That's tomorrow evening as well. Jimmy Legg, thank you so much for that reminder, my friend. And I can tell you that B, Highland Park, malt around 30% of its own barley in-house. So if you've answered B, you get a point for that. I can tell tonight that perhaps you're a wee bit... oh no, Marvin is saying 8 out of 10. Very happy with that. That's a fantastic score, I have to say. Graham Fraser is saying tough tonight, but a pass. Wonderful stuff, Graham. Neil Cochran is saying a way to sit on the naughty step with a 6 out of 10. It's a pass mark. What are you talking about? And Alistair Gray has scored 10 out of 10. Finally, he's using the 10 out of 10 emoji. You start, Alistair. Well done. Somebody has proved that tonight it wasn't that ridiculous a quiz, but it is achievable. Well done, Alistair. Well done, my friend. Anybody else managing a 10 out of 10? Whisky Novice Jim is on 8 out of 10. Great score. Peter Box managed a 9. Well done, Peter. Superb score. James McGorran, Lindsay Holman on 8 out of 10. Esperon 7. Stewie Baby is celebrating his pass. Good for you, Stewie. Well done. 8 out of 10 for Marku. Great score. Lots of good scores, actually. Maybe not nearly as bad as I imagined. Maybe it's not that bad. And Bud Jenkins is using the 10 out of 10 emoji, but saying not 10, not. Well done, Bud. The most important thing is that you're here participating. Richie Z is saying, Roy, is it me or is Tomatin the most active Scotch distillery on YouTube? They're very open-minded. That's all down to Scott Adamson, if I'm honest. He's managed to get his team on board. And Jennifer, she was one of the very, very first, going back about 3 years, that encouraged Scott Adamson, Scott Fraser, to get together and do a live stream on YouTube with Scotch Test Dummies. Still a fantastic stream to watch, still very relevant today. You can go back and watch that on the Scotch Test Dummies channel. They were one of the first channels to open up to the YouTube community. They were certainly the first to push for a lockdown whiskey festival, and they were also the first to invite the YouTube community onto their channel as well. Very open-minded, very comfortable in this space, Tomatin. And I think a lot of producers should feel comfortable in that space too. And I think you can see that it's starting to happen. Good to have it as well. What was Menno saying? 1 in 210. Yeah, that's a good indication. What's the reference? Menno, I'm missing it. And Helen is saying, great evening. Thanks again for such a great guest, Slancher Roy. I loved having Billy on tonight. It was fantastic. Richie Z is saying it, Roy. I picked up yours, Richie. I apologise. Whisky Novice is saying, sometimes we just know the answers, Roy, but not often. Great stream. Thank you. And thanks to Billy. Yes, thank you so much. Bruno Martins is here saying, getting late and meetings very early tomorrow. Must go, but past a lovely night. I did too, Bruno. And I think that's a fantastic sentiment to finish on. You'll see me again, if you choose, for an extended opening on Sunday night. Sunday night is all about, there's no guest, there's no theme, no structure. It's just a relaxed hangout, just kind of hanging out with the community and the chat and things. We'll do the is it a Speyside game? There'll always be a quiz at the end, of course. But I want to raise a wee glass. I'm going to blend what's left of my 15 and my Koval. This isn't Koval, actually. This is just the 9-year-old Ryewood together, so that I can raise a Glenallachie. It's still a single malt. I can raise this glass to Billy, to the team at Glenallachie, for being comfortable about hanging out with us tonight. And I have to say, really, really insightful. This is one of these streams that I want to watch over again so I can listen to Billy again. Just need to find a way of muting out my own dulcet tones. Thank you all so much. I hope to welcome you again on Sunday. And of course, a week from tonight, we'll be welcoming in Julianne, who's the whiskey maker from Distell. She's responsible for Deanston, for Bunnahabhain, for Tobermory and Lechick. So we're continuing that theme of whiskey makers after Michael Henry and Billy Walker, and now Julianne Fernandez as well. Nice times, if that's your thing. I'm really looking forward to welcoming in Julianne. In the meantime, tomorrow night we've got Tomatin Softer Sessions for the prize draw, and the regular content going out tomorrow night. On Saturday, Boutique's got their World Whisky Summit. There'll be a bunch of things happening in between times. Sunday, if you're interested, you can hang out with me again. And if not, I look forward to welcoming you a week from tonight. Thank you all so much for your wonderful support, your wonderful generosity and welcoming nature. It's fabulous to hang out of an evening with you. Until next time, I love you all. Slanchava.